الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. We praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we send peace and blessings upon our beloved Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for blessing us with Islam and giving our heart's life with this religion and allowing us to seek guidance through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through His words, that we may see through the deception and illusions of our time and be able to understand reality at its core. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show us the truth and allow us to follow it, and show us deception and allow us to reject it. Allahumma arina al-haqqa haqqan warzuqna ittiba'a wa arina al-batila batilan warzuqna ijtinaba. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with the seerah, with the history, with the authentic history of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, his story and the story of the companions, but more so the story of Islam. Not just so we can have an appreciation for what they went through, but that we can take the situations that they went through as individuals and as a community, and we can bring them and analyze them, and then come and analyze our situations so that we can see the path that we need to take. And many masajid and Muslims all across the nation, since the election of Donald Trump, have come together and had intimate discussions about where Muslims can have an impact moving forward. What piece of the puzzle do we fit in the greater picture that is America? Because with this new power, right, with this new president-elect, it doesn't just affect the Muslims. It affects everyone. As we can see, the African Americans, the Latinos, the LGBTQ community, the Muslims. It affects, as we see, the Native Americans, the indigenous. And as we reflect upon Thanksgiving, which many of us had the day off of work and saw family and indulged in food and good meals and desserts and all of these things, it is important to remember that in the history of this country, in fact, the foundation of this country was indeed built upon the genocide and mass murder of the Native Americans. And this is something for us that's very important to understand, that of course this country has allotted for us so many opportunities in terms of economic and social and political opportunity to have a good living, to vote, to if someone hurts you, to take them to court, basic fundamentals of justice. And of course, as the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he tells us that everything is like matar, is like water. Right? That water is the nourishment, it's the basis of life, it's good. but then you have storms and you have tsunamis and you have floods. In essence, saying that everything has a beautiful essence and has good things, and everything has bad. Right? That understanding that, yes, of course, we are in this country, we do want what's best for this country. Many of us are immigrants, many of us are born here. But as citizens of this country, Muslims, wherever they go, as the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ tells us, that wherever a Muslim goes, they're like the rain. Right? That wherever you go, your mercy, the rahmah that Allah put into your heart, everyone gets a piece of it. Everyone gets a drop of it. It doesn't discriminate where it drops, like the rain. Everyone feels the mercy of the Muslims. And we are, wherever we go, to be, right, good citizens. But in that, to be a good citizen, we need to be critical. And we need to be truthful as to these realities. And many people are scared. Many people are in fear. Many people have been shaken with uncertainty. You know, uncertainty is scary, not knowing. But we know from Islam that Islam has brought to our hearts yaqeen, that it has brought to our hearts certainty. Certainty in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what I wanted to share with you guys, ladies and gentlemen, what I wanted to share with you all for today was a few insights into Ghazwat al-Khandaq, the battle of the trench, or Ghazwat al-Ahzab, the battle of the Confederates, of the different groups. And I feel that this situation that the Muslims were in, although it is not necessarily similar, it does show us a few things for us as we strategize. And many of us, you know, we did take the election of Donald Trump. Before he was elected, we did take it kind of as a joke. Everyone did. From the people who made the polls, to the media, to you and I, everyone said, this guy is a joke. There's no way that he's going to get elected. Everyone, top to bottom. And then after he got elected, now we're saying, this guy's not going to be able to do anything. And then you look at the people that he's putting into power, like your Steve Bannons as your chief advisor, who is essentially a bigot and a white supremacist. You have all of these people that he's putting into power. And then you have the lining of the Congress and the Senate, who are Republican. Everything is lined up to look like, no, this man can indeed have a lot of impact. And so, for us as Muslims, we do need to begin to strategize. Without a doubt, we need to strategize as individuals and as communities. And so, when we look at Ghazwat Khandaq, we're looking at the Banu Nadir who tried to assassinate the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Medina. They tried to assassinate him. And so the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he had them exiled. So they were in Medina, he removed them from Medina. He had them exiled, which is a very merciful move on his part. Very merciful move. No other punishment or consequence other than being exiled. He also allowed them to take their wealth, carry anything they could, and take it with them, but not, of course, their property and their land. And so you have this setting. And then the Banu Nadir, they get exiled, and they begin to fantasize. You know, what amazing things we had when we were in Medina. What amazing lives and land and property and all these things that we had. And so they begin to scheme. How can we get this land of Khaybar? How can we get it back? And so they said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We know the Quraysh hate the Muslims. We're going to go and we're going to incite them, right, to come and join forces with us against the Muslims. So you have Banu Nadir, and then you have the Quraysh. Then you have, on top of that, and this is obviously much later, I'm trying to summarize to the best of my ability, you have Banu Qurayza, who was a tribe that had a treaty with the Muslims. And they get them to break the treaty with the Muslims. And then you have all these other tribes, smaller tribes, that also align with Banu Nadir. And then there's a large tribe, which is Al-Ghafatan, who make up about 40% of these Ahzab, these groups that Allah calls them. Ghafatan, they say there were about, a lot of Mufassirin say there were about 4,000 men from Ghafatan of the whole 10,000. And so essentially what you're looking at is you're looking at a unified alliance against the Muslims that, in terms of military fighting and logistics, would easily wipe out the Muslims, who are, scholars of history estimate to be 2,000 or 2,500. And so you're talking about one Muslim to 5 others in battle. And so this, of course, the Muslims right away, they're told that there is 10,000 men marching to Medina. Marching, an army marching to you right now. And they took it seriously. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, the first thing that he does, the first thing, is he immediately gathers all of the Sahaba. Not just, Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman, not just his intimate, every single one of the Sahaba. And so for this is our first lesson. First lesson, when we're faced with this type of opposition, or we're faced with fear, or we're faced with some type of overwhelming struggle that we have to overcome, the first thing that we need to do is we need to come together. And you'll find that a lot of masajid, when they say come together, at least here, they say come together, they'll bring together, the board or something, and then they'll talk about it. But this is different. It's everyone. And so it's on the institutions and on the Muslims to do more outreach, right? Use all the channels of media, of all of social media, of all the channels, and talking to one another, really reaching out to make sure everyone is in here and talking and strategizing, discussing, and sharing ideas. And it's not enough to just have 5-10 people in a room. And so what was the result of this gathering? They all come together, they're all talking, and everyone's saying, well, we should do this, and we should do that, and we should do this, and we should do that. But of course, from all of this, and I'm sure all of you know, from all of this talking rises the great idea of Salman al-Farisi, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, right? The idea to dig the trench, al-Khandaq. And Salman al-Farisi was a very wise man, a very elderly man from Persia who had experienced and lived through many cultures. And this is key, because this teaches us every single person in the community is Salman al-Farisi. Every single one of us has an idea or has some type of knowledge or experience that the other person does not have. Right? We need to realize that and know that every single person that we can bring into our community offers what Salman al-Farisi offers. We can't belittle our community. Right? We have to build people up. And we'll see later how the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ does exactly this. And so that's the first point. Getting the community together and having everyone talk and strategize and come and have different ideas. The second point is that they all agree upon the Khandaq. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ approves it. And then right away, they start digging the trench. They have them coming, they have about 2 weeks to dig this trench. The scholars of history say this trench is about 2 miles. It's not all of Medina, it's just a certain part due to strategy and different geographic features of Medina. They didn't have to do it all. And so, once they decide this is our course of action, every single person gets their hands dirty with digging the trench. And that is the second point. The second point is that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ himself, day and night, digging a trench. And so this is the second point. For those who wish to benefit the community with their money or with their leadership, such as holding board positions or volunteer positions, or just benefiting the community with giving of their wealth, or whatever it may be, whatever one's role is in the community, that does not exempt them from doing the actual work. Right? The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, of course, he's al-Qa'id, he's the general, he's the leader, but look at where he is, he's digging the trench. And so this is the second thing, is that leaders, right, they have to practice, and everyone has to get involved on the ground, from the grassroots. And as the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ tells us about leadership, right? Sayyid al-Qawmi khadimuhum, that the leader, right, of any people, right, is their servant, is the one that's going to serve them. So that's an important point about leadership there. And so for us, when we look into the seerah, we often find sometimes a disconnect, and we look at really how amazing the Sahabi were, and that kind of discourages us sometimes. And we see though that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He kept the morale of the people digging the trench very high. Even though at times they were all suffering. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kind of talks about this. يظنون بالله الظن. يعني they all had different thoughts about Allah. Allah talks about this in the Quran, that they all started to think, where is Allah's help? Where is, why is this happening? They all had all different types of thoughts, especially, the hypocrites. The hypocrites, because they're, especially after the breaking of the treaty of Bani Qurayza, they're starting to think, there is no way that we even have a chance. And they're ready to jump on the other side. And subhanAllah, it's so beautiful how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspires the Muslims and gives them certainty in a state of uncertainty. And one of those ways was that when they were digging the trench, many of the Sahabi, they came upon a huge boulder that was in the trench. They couldn't dig it out, they couldn't do anything with it. So they tried to take the axe and they keep trying to break the boulder, but they're not able to. And then the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, they call him over, and he comes over and he kind of takes off his shirt and gets ready, because he's going to try to break the axe, break the boulder. And so he takes the axe and he says, Bismillah, Allahu Akbar, and he strikes at the boulder. And as he strikes, about 1/3 of the boulder comes off. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he says, I just saw that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me the keys to Syria, to Syria. And Syria at the time was controlled by the Romans. So what does this mean? It means that Allah just gave the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ a vision that the Muslims would conquer Syria and defeat the Romans, who are the power of the time. The Muslims, who are just a few, who are on the verge of getting wiped off the face of the earth, and Islam is no more. And Allah is telling them and giving the vision to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that no, here is a vision that you're going to conquer Syria. And then he strikes, Bismillah, Allahu Akbar, again at the boulder. Another piece comes off. And he says, I see, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, I see that Allah has given me the keys to Persia. And so subhanAllah, now Allah is telling him that you will conquer Persia. And the Muslims are in the worst state. And this is what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is envisioning. And then lastly, he strikes, Bismillah, Allahu Akbar, one more time. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him the vision, and he sees that he's been given the keys to Yemen. And all of Persia and Rome, they were conquered within 20 years of this vision. And so subhanAllah, you're seeing a dire moment of the Muslims. And within 20 years, they're conquering Rome and Persia. So it just shows you here our original point, which is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, He kind of shows them their future. It shows them a vision of the future. How amazing they're going to be, the potential that they're going to reach. But also it shows how quickly things can change. Right? 1 second, you're here, you're at the bottom. Within just a few years, Not even one generation, they're at the top. So subhanAllah, this is some insight for us. Things, right, may look dire, but if we strategize, if we take the right steps and have certainty in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though it is a terrifying state, we can push forward. We can, inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can completely change our affair. And so that's something very beautiful that the Muslims all started talking about after they had heard this. And they had kind of grown in morale. They would kind of, as they say, they kind of got some energy in their step. And as they were digging the trench, they used to chant and say different songs. Of course, there's no instruments or anything. They're just chanting like anashid. And they're saying, Allahumma lawla anta ma sallayna. They're saying, mahtadayna wala sallayna. They're saying, oh Allah, if not for you, we would have not been guided and we would have never prayed. And so they're appreciating Allah, right? They're digging this trench. They're in a terrible situation. They have barely any food. They're not really eating anything except for dates, and on a good occasion, some dry barley that's mixed with old cooking oil, and they're in a terrible situation. They didn't even, they said that narration said they barely had any food. And that was because it wasn't in a time of harvest. So it was around the winter time. And they didn't know this was obviously going to happen. So it's not like they saved up any food from when it was time of harvest. So they have little food. They're tired. They're scared. They're working day and night digging this trench. They have a very short deadline. They're on their last strings. But what are they doing in that moment? They're saying, Allah, if you didn't guide us, if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't have guidance, we wouldn't have prayer, we wouldn't have charity, we wouldn't have our adab, our akhlaq, our manners, our ethics, we wouldn't have the peace of mind and the tranquility in our hearts, we wouldn't have any of these things. So they're reminding themselves of the beauty of their religion and their love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they're saying that, and they're saying, Anzil as-sakina alayna. Right? They're saying, oh Allah, send upon us tranquility, as-sakina. And so for that, there's something to think about, that in these times of fear, times of war, times of turbulence, we ask Allah for sakina, because sakina, what sakina allows us to do, and it's, imagine you're driving your car, for instance, and there's different trucks around you, there's all these different things, and then there's someone swerves in front of you or something, some type of near accident occurs. Someone that begins to panic, begins to get scared, begins to do all of these things, they most likely will crash too. But someone who is tranquil, who's at peace, who's calm, who's composed, right, will be able to see what's happening in front of them and steer themselves away. And so, what did they ask for? They asked Allah for sakina, right? They asked Allah for tranquility. So that's the first thing that we have to remember, is that we need to first remember why we do all that we do. Why are we in the masjid? Why are we trying to have good families and good children, and why are we praying, and why are we doing all of these things? It's for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the first thing. We need to get back to our core. The second thing is we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for tranquility. And that the reality is that if we're fearing the situation more than we fear, for instance, missing Fajr, then we have a problem. We should fear missing Fajr more than we should fear Trump or whatever is going on out there. We need to take care of ourselves first and our obligations to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first and foremost. And then the last part of their chant is they say something very beautiful and very powerful. They say, إِذَا أَرَادُوا فِتْنَةً أَبَيْنَا. They're saying, these people, they want to persecute us. They want us to not allow us to practice our religion, to be Muslims, to be who we are. And if they want this, they should know, أبينا, we refuse. If they think they can stop us from being who we are, from being the Muslims that we are, they should know that we refuse. And for us, we should also have that kind of fearlessness, to say that this is my life, right? Islamu dini, this is my life. Allah gave life to our hearts through this religion, right? Have that type of fearlessness. And when we look at the media and we look at so many things, it's very easy to withdraw from that attitude. Because when you have people calling you terrorists, calling you extremists, when you have people, who always, have you under a magnifying glass, they want to see, how extreme are you? And even if you pray, subhanAllah, that's like something crazy. And so we do have to have that kind of thick skin. Have some thick skin. And have our feet firm, as they also say in the chant, ثبت أقدامنا أنزل علينا السكينة وثبت أقدامنا. Make our stance, right, our feet firm, right? And so that's, for us, is a beautiful lesson for us from Ghazwat al-Khandaq. And there's so much more. There's so much more that we can take from this. But I just wanted to share one more thing. And this is kind of fast forwarding now to the end. And there are two things that have occurred. And one of those things is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one of the miracles that He sent during Ghazwat al-Ahzab, during this battle, was a sandstorm. A sandstorm, one of the most, or in fact the most severe sandstorm that they had ever experienced before. You could not even see, if you put your arm out, you can't see it through the sand. Their eyes are full of sand, their mouth is full of sand, their nose is full of sand. The opposition is completely stifled by this sandstorm. Their animals are dead, their food is depleted, they're hungry, they're tired, they're thirsty. They can't even start a fire. They try to start a fire, they can't. And so Allah, one of the things that He gives them, of course, is that sandstorm. And towards the end, because, just for the sake of time, the forces, the Ahzab, who are under the power of Abu Sufyan, they have a lot of confusion between them. And they're not exactly united. Even though they're all united, they're not really sincere to the cause. They all have different reasons why they're doing what they do. For instance, Ghafatan, they have a deal with Banu Nadir to take half of the harvest of Khaybar for the next year after they defeat the Muslims. The point is that there are different reasons why they're there. So the communication and the leadership and obedience and all of these things, they're not good. They're not on the same page. And so that also works to the Muslims' advantages. But the point that I wanted to make was, subhanAllah, this part of the story and this narration really, it brings a different perspective to me. And it's really beautiful. And it's that at one point, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, towards the end of Ghazwat al-Ahzab, he needs to send someone over to Abu Sufyan's camp, to the camp outside of the trench, to get some information, to see what's going on. And so he has to send someone, a Sahabi, into enemy territory. And so he asked all the Sahabi, he said, which one of you is willing to go over and get this information that we need? And subhanAllah, not one of the Sahabi volunteered. Not one of them. And usually, when we hear stories of the Sahabi, we hear stories of the Sahabi jumped up. The Prophet asked something or said something and boom, they're up, they're doing whatever he said. But this instance, and maybe it's the only instance in all of the seerah, that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ asked the Sahabi for something and every single one of them kept quiet. And so the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, no one volunteered. And so he says, Hudayfa ibn Yaman, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, you go. So he puts him on the spot, he calls him out, said, you're the one who's going to go. And so Hudayfa, he can't say anything, but he's on the spot, he got called out, there's nothing he can do, he has to go. And so he says, okay, and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he makes dua for him specifically that Allah brings down sakina, his tranquility, and takes the terror, the fear out of Hudayfa's heart. Because they're so scared, they're so hungry. They're at that point where it's so bad that the Prophet asks for something, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they don't want to do it. That's amazing. That's how bad the situation is. And so for us, we often criticize our communities. And we say, look at, we're trying to do this program, or we're trying to do this, and only a few people are coming. Or, we only have, we don't have any volunteers for the masjid, or we don't have any volunteers for this cause. No one is willing to do it. And so, subhanAllah, it's important for us to look at this situation and see a situation where even the Sahabi, they didn't want to volunteer. And so for us, instead of us criticizing our communities and saying, why doesn't anyone want to volunteer? Why doesn't anyone want to? Rather, we need to look at the asbab, the reasons why, and try to empower our communities over those factors. And then secondly, that if we're leaders, and all of us are leaders, right? Kullukum ra'i, right? You're all leaders, you're all responsible, you're all guiders, shepherds. We're all leaders. As leaders, we need to see people and say, you would be great at this, you do this. You would be good for this, you do this. And then you support them and make dua for them and give them the tools they need to succeed. But to have that mentality as a leader and have that influence where you can say to someone, to a friend, to someone that you should do this. And if we look, for instance, into Musa alayhi salam, right, where he says, وَجَعَلْ وَزِيرًا مِنْ أَهْلِي هَارُونَ أَخِي, right? And he says, make Harun a prophet too. And so this is what the prophets did. This is what Musa did. He became a prophet. He said, oh Allah, make my brother a prophet too. And that's what we should do too. When Allah gives us guidance, we need to look around and say, I need to bring someone with me. To love for your brother what you love for yourself. If you love for yourself to be advancing and getting close to Allah, grab someone by the hand and take them with you. And that's what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ from his leadership shows us. And so for us, looking into, the situation that we face right now in the United States, we do need to take some major lessons from the seerah and begin to chip away at a strategy. Like the trench wasn't something by force. It was applying their mind and their reason and their experience to defeat a greater power. And so for us, it's the same thing. We need to analyze the situation and know that we're not going to just be able to get whatever we want. We need to sit down and strategize and talk. And so I think at this point now, inshallah, if we, anyone who wants to say a few words or really, put forth something to the table that we can talk about, and even if it's just getting, different sides of the story, different strategies, different perspective, different feelings, different emotions. So many people are scared. Just talking about that is important. So I wanted to, at this point, inshallah, to just open some discussion for anyone who would like to say something before we break for dinner, inshallah. So if there's any questions or comments or feedback or discussion points, or if there's anything that I missed that you want to add on, please do, inshallah. Does anyone want to start? So, for instance, one of my ideas that I've been thinking about is that maybe the Muslims should not start with their own agenda. I was thinking maybe we shouldn't start with our own agenda. And usually what is our agenda? The Muslims' agenda is we don't want to be called terrorists, and we don't want our sisters and our daughters, our women to be harassed, to get their hijab ripped off or anything like that. For the most part, I see that that's really the only two issues that the Muslims care about. And then a third one is immigration stuff, facing harassment in terms of immigration. And I just feel in general that the Muslims are very kind of short-sighted in the problems that they see. They're just seeing these issues and they say, these are the issues that we need to tackle. But when we look at this problem on a greater scale, we see, with the Black Lives Matter movement, we see with the African American community and the struggles that they're facing. And then, you see the issues of the Native Americans and the Sioux tribe at Standing Rock, fighting and standing up to the corporations to protect their water and stop the pipeline from being built. And the issues with the Latino and Hispanic community that they're facing, and of course the Muslims and what they're facing. And so there's many communities that are facing this type of fear and this type of bigotry and hate. And I feel that the best strategy for the Muslims is in fact to serve the needs of the other communities before we serve our own. And that way we build strong alliances, strong connections, rather than simply looking at our own, because that keeps us in a circle. The other idea that I was thinking about, and I talked with a few people, is that, subhanAllah, there's a huge African American Muslim demographic in the United States. And that we need to understand that African American Muslims have been struggling in this country since before any of our fathers or grandfathers immigrated to this country. That is the original Muslim struggle. And I believe that for us to truly unite and prosper, we need to get back to making the African American Muslims the face of Islam. And when you talk about the face of Islam, you're talking about, Hajj Malik Shabazz, you're talking about Malcolm X, you're talking about Muhammad Ali, may Allah have mercy on their souls. You're talking about giants in this country who were the face of Islam at their times. And I think, and I believe that getting back to making them the face of Islam again will allow us to further unite and build connections that will allow Islam to then be at the forefront of social justice, not just worrying about ourselves, but rather going out and fulfilling the needs and the rights of our brothers and sisters before our own. And that was just one idea that many people came up with, and a few ideas. So every single one of us needs to start thinking in that way. First, of course, looking back, gaining guidance from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and his companions, and then coming forward and trying to have innovative and creative ideas that can push the Ummah forward. So, I don't know, if anyone wants to say anything, you're more than welcome to. If not, then if I've gone over time, then we can just move to dinner, inshallah. Up to you guys. Anyone, the sisters, do you have anything for us? Here's some mumbles. Should I just pick on one of you guys? Well, that's okay. No pressure. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send upon our hearts tranquility, sakina, wa rahmah. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase us in guidance and knowledge and wisdom, that we may navigate through the affairs of these times, and that we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us leaders and to allow us to realize the leadership that is in our hands and the power that is in our hands to really be sources of light and of goodness for our ummah and this nation. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive me if I made any errors or mistakes or said anything wrong or caused any harm. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from all of us and reward all of us for coming together in His house. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us and to protect our families and to keep us from harm and to disarm those who wish to harm us and allow us to practice this beautiful religion freely and without struggle or difficulty. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Peace and blessings be upon you all. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, inshallah, and enjoy the dinner downstairs. And inshallah, keep the conversation going.